Hey folks, I'm Robert Quinn, your LinkedIn Semiconductor Industry Ambassador. I am here with Sean. Sean has just joined Everspin as Vice President of Sales in August 2025. Sean, I wanted to pick your brain, talk about memory. What's going on with this memory market? My gosh, it's just like every time I turn on the LinkedIn, all I see is memory problems and issues with supply chains and the demand that's coming like unbelievably right now. It's if you could just give me a little introduction about yourself, what you do, and I know that you've just got tons of experience in this industry, and I'd love to just pick your brain and learn more about it.
Absolutely, Robert. So first of all, thank you for the invitation and the introduction. It absolutely has been like quite chaotic, and coming out of the 2020 through 2026 kind of supply chain crisis, we kind of thought we would have a little reprieve from this, but no rest for the weary. I've been in the industry, as you kind of highlighted, for quite a while. Memory is new to me, but the previous 20 years I spent Altera, then acquired by Intel, then part of helping set up the spin out of Altera again in various different roles. And I was actually leading the supply chain crisis for the Altera division and running sales and marketing for them before I departed Intel. So I get to live this twice, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So, can you tell me a little bit about what you're seeing from your end? Being with Everspin, what's actually happening in the memory market today?
Well, I think, so first of all, I think you got to rewind to the previous supply crisis. I think as many companies and many suppliers were kind of rolling through 2024 and 2025, they were in this digestion phase of a massive amount of inventory from the previous crisis. So as people were going through 24 and into 25, they were starting to get to that point where new organic demand was really driving things up. The previous kind of supply glut had been eaten through, and that organic demand was really starting to push suppliers north right at the same time that this AI boom kind of kicked into gear. And I think everybody kind of learned in all of these supply crises, when it happens, the people that make the components need to maximize their revenue streams for where that demand is coming from. And you certainly see that playing out now, where the supply to the HBM, the supply to the high-end DDR is what everybody is talking about. And you're seeing that impact other people that need DDR and HBM in their systems, where they're now chasing it. You're either the haves, the big guys that have the demand that are getting the committed supply, or you're part of the have-nots that don't. And that's really where that energy's been over the last bit, where you're seeing the dialogue going, you're seeing the price increases going, and you're seeing the people who are on the outs are decommitted, struggling and strategizing as to how they move forward.
So is it a supply issue or is it an allocation issue?
Yes. So fundamentally, the big guys, they talked about, they're sold out for years, right? So the demand and the demand is absolutely real. And I think you go back to some of the old supply crises and you look at double ordering and triple ordering and all that stuff. There's probably some of that going on with the people downstream a little bit, but I think at the high end, there's very solid view of the GPU clusters and the servers and these kind of things. So the units there and the memory demand associated with them is probably fairly well correlated. So I don't think you see a lot of squirreling away of memory and that type of thing. But there's probably some strategy in some of that at the high end to make sure they have what they need to meet their capacity needs.
And from Everspin's perspective, how are your markets responding to this memory volatility?
So, and this was one of the things, the reason why I joined the company, and part of the conversations when I was talking with the leadership about joining was, how did you guys navigate the previous supply chain crisis? And one of the very, very encouraging things was that I learned that Everspin has a very solid control over their manufacturing and capacity. They were able to step in and take upside demand in the previous crisis, and we're in a very similar position today. While NOR memory isn't specifically in the crisis today, it's mostly NAND, DDR, and HBM. It's putting pressure on the NOR capacity as many of those suppliers move their capacity away from NOR and some of these other technologies into the higher demand, higher margin memories that they can manufacture. So Everspin is pin compatible and socket compatible with a lot of those NOR sockets. So we're seeing demand come to us, and we're absolutely capable of taking on that upside demand without any impact to capacity and prices. We're always looking to invest to grow there, but we've been very, very stable on lead time and capacity. We could take on all the orders that come our way, and our prices have been very, very stable. So we're very, very in control of our supply chain, and we look forward to being engaged with customers that are having those challenges. We also have a DRAM-like product that attaches to FPGA and is very, very fruitful for us.
Really?
But that requires customers to look at their controller or have an FPGA connected to their DDR. So we're talking to a lot of customers there that see our DDR offering. That's a little bit of the longer term play.
Like back to memory, I spent a lot of time talking about semiconductor supply chain and, sourcing strategies. And I was just recently hosted an event at Texas Semiconductor Summit with Chris Miller, the author of Chip War. We're digging deep into, the supply chain and the sourcing strategies and how we're going to build a sustainable system right here in the US. Are your customers rethinking sourcing strategies? What are you seeing from your end?
They are, and they're always asking. It's another kind of highlight for Everspin is we have fab here in Chandler, Arizona that manufactures a good portion of our supply and our components. And then the other manufacturer is Global Foundries that has that and has the ability to do that in the U.S. It's absolutely being top of mind for companies of where that's being built. But you also have to remember that for way longer than 10 years, memory as an ecosystem has just been driven into commodity. Every system that goes in, when you look at the bill of materials and you look at the cost of a system, memory has always kind of dominated the cost of systems, and the pressure has been on them to drive prices down. And you can only do that so long before people start to exit out of that because they can't see a commercial viability to do it. And historically in the U.S. that has been tough. Outside of some of the changes that happened recently to incentivize people to come back. But that takes a long time to build and commit to. You watched Intel exit memory. You've seen other people kind of exit, and they exit from commodity up. They don't exit from the high margin business down. So it's going to take a while to rebuild that globally and rebuild that in the U.S.
Absolutely. Dell's COO just said he never witnessed a cost escalating at the current pace that it is right now. What does it look like downstream for the system designers and OEMs? And from your perspective, how are you seeing that?
Yeah, I think the system designers is probably the biggest challenge, right? Because they have to look 3 to 5 years out on how do they architect the system, and it's extremely challenging because it's trying to read tea leaves and look at the crystal ball to figure out what's going to be available. The architecture says that DRAM and NAND are the way to go because they have the performance, they have everything you need. The CPUs and the MCUs and everything are architected around it, but you don't know if you can get it, right? So I think a couple of things. Number one, I think everybody at the system level has to look at how do we use less memory, and that fundamentally has always been the hardware software kind of yin and yang of system design of, well, memory's just, we'll just get more, we'll just keep throwing it on there. And now you're at a point where that's the constraint in the system. And, people have to look at it differently, right? Because a company's going to have a certain amount of memory over a certain number of years. How do they maximize deploying that memory for the workloads and achieve their revenue goals? So downstream, and especially in industrial and automotive and all the other places that have, very similar memory needs, they're going to be on the outside looking in, and they're going to have to look at architectures that, number one, in the short term, reduce memory footprints. And in that medium to long term, what can they do architecturally to pivot off of where the demand pinch is and into other places, right? So people that have the ability to reprogram their controller interface and adapt different memory footprints and memory formats will probably be able to pivot a little bit quicker.
Absolutely, which really makes me think about how is memory forcing its way into earlier design cycles, right? And we've got to start thinking about this a little bit ahead of time.
For sure. And it's part of that kind of commodity conversation that we were chatting with a little bit earlier, right? The cool thing is Everspin and MRAM has always been that earlier decision criteria because of the uniqueness, the endurance, the performance that the memory offers. We've often, when we're really aligned with the value prop or a much earlier design in question, when you kind of get out to the commodity level where we're pin compatible with NOR and all the other ones, it becomes less of an early decision. But the smart companies and smart designers are going to be looking at architectures and say, how can I disconnect myself from where a commodity pinch may play in the future?
And the environment's changing, so customers think about alternative memory, technologies, and are you seeing that from your end as well? That's kind of one of the solutions to not just memory, but a lot of different chips. I've had discussions with companies such as Caterpillar and Bobcat. How do we even with their not necessarily memory but other chips in that sector.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the other lessons that we learned on the previous crisis we're just exiting is it doesn't matter how small the component is. When you fold up to the system level, the smallest component or the smallest shortage can shut down industries, right? And the visibility into the supply chain is not often well understood at the system or the deployment level. If you look at deploying a data center, all the focus is going to be on these servers and these systems in the memory. But keep in mind, there's a massive amount of equipment that relies on other semiconductors and other memory and other distribution that needs to happen to get into there as well, right? So it can be very short-sighted to say all we need to do is feed these, and then you fast forward and you find out that they don't get deployed because the rest of the ecosystem is shut down. So I would say there's still quite a bit of understanding and learning that needs to go on as this communication goes out from the HBM, the DRAM, and the NAND, and then the second and third order impacts of that start to work through the economy and the supply chain. And people start to raise their hands and say, I can't ship this because I'm not getting it. And the same folks that are trying to deploy a new data center say, I can't. I got the servers, I got the racks, I got the GPUs, I got the DDR and HBM, but I don't have the power supply, or I don't have the monitoring equipment, or I don't have the generators to support it if it goes offline. So I don't think that's well understood yet.
No. Speaking of DRAM NAND, what cases make sense to move away from it, right? And
yeah, so I think there's probably many architectures that don't need the latest, and I think our designers have been conditioned to follow the PC and server memory footprints because it drives the prices down. And I think that needs to be rethought. I may not need DDR5. I may be able to get away with DDR4 or 3 or something else. And there may be suppliers that come back online because they now have a market where it disappeared, right? So everybody was get on that latest because the big guys are driving the cost curve down, and I can benefit from being on that cost curve and commercially have an advantage of having that in my architecture. And they're going to need to quickly see if they can pivot back to other options that are good enough performative for them to ship. If you can't ship, you have zero performance. So these are the tough decisions that I imagine many engineers and teams are sitting around saying, what can we do given where we currently are with hardware that would otherwise have to be completely redesigned. So that's gonna be that short-term piece of what can we do now, and then what can we do in that kind of medium term while we re-architect our offering.
Are you seeing anybody rethink that second source strategy?
Absolutely. I mean, fundamentally, absolutely. For the last 6 to 12 months, we are seeing more and more people come to us. Like I said earlier, our MRAMs are pin compatible and interoperable with NOR. And as manufacturers exit those markets, lead times are going up, and the prices are skyrocketing across the NOR market. We're seeing a lot more requests for samples and getting our parts in as second source.
Yeah. You think there's any relief in the next 12 to 18 months?
I don't. I mean, again, the big guys are saying they're sold out.
Yeah.
They're decommitting from some lower margin portions of their business, reallocating that capacity to feed that high end demand that seems insatiable. To me, that's that 12 to 18 months, right? Unless they come back and say that's not real, I really don't, right? I think the near term piece is to people to really uncover what the second, third order impacts of those decommits, those lead times, those price increases due to their markets, right? There's only so much that can happen before people, just fundamentally move off. And I think you're seeing it in some of the recent press releases on the impacts of laptops, right? So what does that do in the next 2 quarters for PC sales? What does that do for laptop sales? Tablet sales and mobile sales as these prices start to impact more significantly into those markets.
Yeah, we've both been in this industry for 20 something years, and the ups and the downs and the cyclical market, but I always like to try to read in between the lines, right? And what are the signals you're watching to try to figure out, what's going to happen?
Well, I think fundamentally it's overall good news, right? Which is that people are having the conversation around the entire supply chain, how we take control of that in the US and in Europe to make sure that we have control over that, and taking a much longer view and a more complex view as to where things are being made and that overall supply chain. So that's good for the long term, and I think we'll ride out this short term impact. But fundamentally, that demand and that organic demand around something that is, I believe, adding value to a lot of people's lives. For all the fear around AI, it's real. It's valuable. It's working, and it's adding value to all of us. That being said, how do you balance making sure that that's being supplied and it can deploy and continue to add value, and there's enough supply getting everywhere else? So I think you'll see some of that reorganizing of that demand. It happened last time, right, where suppliers were saying, "Oh, we're giving it all here," and then you learn these interactions and threads that were connected, and say, "All right, I have to pull some of that and feed these areas so all of it can ship." My server can't ship if I don't ship this smaller component to these guys as well. And I think that learning will probably come out really, really quick as people start to highlight critical infrastructure and critical things that can't be built because they're not able to get these components in the short term. And I think that's probably the next 3 to 6 months as that becomes real. But then I'm hopeful that will rebalance, and as long as that demand remains consistent and ongoing, the current mindset of building capacity and funding at the federal level capacity in the U.S. is encouraging.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely.
So they're recognizing this. I'm sure they're all having these conversations above my pay grade to make sure that these things are funded and staffed, and the red tape's cut to be able to get these things going and built. That's super important.
Yeah, I was recently flown out to Washington D.C. through the Department of Commerce, and and just one of the things I realized is so many people don't know, right? And and you wonder if these decision makers really understand. What is the biggest thing executives and policymakers are getting wrong about it, do you think?
What are they getting wrong about it? Thinking too short term. I think, and not listening, to your point. I think the nice thing, whether you have, aligned with this administration or not, I think fundamentally they're listening to executives. And that is something that maybe, historically hadn't happened before, right? So getting them in there and hearing about, what, some of these things we talked about, and how the lower or middle end of the supply chain could limit the deployment of the data centers and the AI, and having us continue to lead the AI race. I think that will get to their ears. I think that will absolutely land at their desk, and they will have an audience for that, and they will adjust appropriately. Now, it doesn't solve that immediate short-term piece, but I think it will allow them to make adjustments where they can.
Yeah. It's you want to make sure that people understand this technology, and this ecosystem is so huge. There's so much to know, and nobody knows everything about it. And I enjoy that 30,000 foot view, really, and trying to, although I can talk physics and talk about atomic layer deposition and other processes, but really everybody needs to know that 30,000 foot view. What is, moving back to kind of like architects and architecture, what is your advice to systems architecting systems in the future?
Well, I think really taking a healthy look at the memory architectures and the memory needs, not the memory wants, or ignoring the ever-growing size of memory, right? I think there's an efficient way for them to look at the high-performant memory that's needed and how big that needs to be effective. And I also think you're probably going to see some really good creative memory offerings that come out of it. If you look at DRAM as an architecture, I don't think the fundamental architecture of a DRAM cell has changed significantly over time, right? So this will provide impetus for innovation and R&D into memory systems. And you've got this near-term thing with DRAM and all that stuff, but you also have quantum computing coming with multi-level, right? So this may fund and fuel energy around memory architecture design that kind of gets architects thinking about, why are we doing memory this way? Why are we creating cache structures this way? Why are we not leveraging non-volatile more? And, architectures like MRAM is caching, and can we do things to accelerate and limit the use of long-term storage by using AI and these types of things in how we keep and store memory and keep and store caches flush. So I imagine that all of these architects are looking at it with a renewed amount of energy because now there's a commercial and a viability motivation to do so.
That's great. That's great.
It was always just free, right?
Yeah.
Just by the time we get there, it'll be 3 times as much and a third the price. And I think that's changing.
Yeah. Well, Sean, thanks so much for joining me today and talking about just this memory issue, the problems that we're seeing, from the architectural to the supply chain, just covering it all at 30,000 feet and talking about how we can build this sustainable supply chain and be better prepared for what's coming in the future, because I think this is going to be more of the same. I keep getting asked by magazines around the world, what's going to change, what's going to be different. I think get ready for more of the same. It's we're going to see the ups, we're going to see the downs, we're going to continue to see tariffs, we're going to continue to see a lot of the cyclical supply chain problems, and it's going to be, how do you better prepare for that in the future, right? And how do companies better prepare for that? So it's great having you on the show, and thanks so much for joining me today and talking about that. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to the end?
I would just say I look forward to Embedded World in Germany is coming up. I imagine that's going to be spicy conversations with everybody involved on this topic, right? So I look forward to the conversations. I look forward to learning from my customers and other suppliers about what they're doing to be different, and looking for opportunities to partner up and be part of the solution, right? Because I think that's the opportunity where crisis and challenges often present opportunities for suppliers to partner up and customers to partner up and find a way through. So again, another one of the values that Everspin offers is the ability to engineer a way out of some of these challenges. So look forward to those conversations as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you to Everspin. Thank you, Sean, for joining us, and hope you have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you.